Well, right off the bat, I need to report that Chairman Strand called me a little bit ago and is recovering from an illness, so he asked yours truly if I could chair the meeting today, and I said, of course I can do that. Mayor Mahoney is out today as well, some medical training that he's got going on. So anyway, we're all here, and I think, Shelley, in place of roll call, which we have listed on the top of the agenda, Chairman Strand typically just has us go around the table and introduce ourselves. So I'll start out. I'm Bruce Grubb, and I'm with the City of Fargo Administration. Brenda?
Brenda Derrig, Assistant City Administrator.
James Hand, Director of Facilities, Fargo Public Schools.
Sean Paschke, Key Account Manager, XL Energy.
Paul Mathis, Cass County Electric Cooperative.
Julie Baumelman, City of Fargo, Transit.
Dave Beats, Deputy Director of Operations, Fargo Park District.
I'm Abinya Cavasari, the Youth Representative.
Ben Dow, Fargo Public Works.
Becky Majerus, City of Fargo, Director of Facilities Management.
Shauna Radnick, City of Fargo Inspections Department.
Shelley Byron, City of Fargo, Scribe.
Zoe Apsey, Public Representative.
Thank you, and Zoe, I think you've got. Oh, Greta's online. Hi, Greta. I'll let you introduce yourself. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Greta Graymig, Public Representative.
And then also online, we do have Colin Rolfing. He's associated with item 5 on our agenda today. But Zoe, you brought a guest with you. Do you want to introduce her now or in a few moments?
In a few minutes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Item 2 on our agenda is to approve the agenda. And so if you've all had a chance to look at that, I would entertain a motion to approve. Or if you've got something to change, I have one thing, and that's at the bottom of the agenda. I'm still stuck in 2023, but the next February will occur in 2024. So I would like to make that correction. Now I would entertain a motion to approve.
I'd make that motion.
Motion by Brenda.
Second.
Second by Ben. Motion and a second. Any further discussion at all? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, please. Motion carries. And then item number 3, the minutes from our August 8th, 2023 meeting. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but it was quite a while ago now. If you've had a chance to read through those, if you have any corrections, please share that now. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from August 8th. Motion by Julie, thank you. Second by Zoe, thank you. Motion and second. Any further thoughts, discussion on the minutes? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, please. Motion carries. Thank you. So on to item 4 on our agenda. When it comes to sustainability and resiliency, it encompasses more than just energy. That's primarily what we talk about here. But there are other vital things like food and water that are important to sustain us as well. And so thought it might be a good idea to spend a little time on what's happening locally on those topics as well. So first up, item 4A, with respect to food resiliency initiatives, the Great Plains Food Bank and others are filling a critical role in our area and have been working on a new resource with the help of Matt Buss on a food pantry location mapping app. Zoe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Fortunately, we were made aware of this and thought that it really might be good information to share with the SRC group today. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to you. I do think we've got your stuff loaded up on the screen, so that public podium is where you'd operate from. So you can introduce your guest too. Thank you.
Perfect. And if you want to pass those around.
Love to.
So thank you everyone for having us. I'm Joy Apsey. I'm the Community Initiative Manager at Great Plains Food Bank, and this is my colleague.
I'm Nicole Elka. I'm also with Great Plains Food Bank. I am the Regional Services Manager for the eastern side of North Dakota. Do I need to speak into this? And Clay County. And that means that I oversee all of our food pantries, meal sites, and our mobile food pantry on that side of North Dakota. And specifically, we're talking about Cass and Clay counties today.
So just a little background as to why this initiative came to be. We conduct a Hunger on the Plains study every 4 years. And so that was conducted in 2022. And something that came up that was really relevant across the state, and specifically in Cass and Clay counties, was transportation. So 34 of individuals who took our survey, which are folks who are using the charitable feeding network, so using food pantries and meal sites, said that they would find it easier to get the food they needed if they had home delivery. 40% said that they do not have access to a vehicle that runs, and 46 of respondents said that they had one of these issues in accessing free groceries, so using the charitable feeding network. So access to a car or public transit, they couldn't afford gas or the fare, and had trouble carrying their food home. So seeing this, we know that it's and we hear from community members on the daily, we hold focus groups, and we hear transportation. It's always coming up that it's an issue and it's a barrier to accessing these free resources. And we know a lot of individuals utilize the public transit system, and so how can we bring these resources to them? And so this is where Nicole kind of took it.
So we utilize the gracious support of some interns that were working with us at the Great Plains Food Bank. And I had this thought in my head, how can we partner with our local MAP bus transit system to spread the word about not only our food pantries, but how they can use the bus to transport their food back home. And so we pulled all of the routes that were applicable to our partners, and within a 10 to 15 minute walking from drop-off location to the physical pantry or meal site. So this is not all inclusive of every route, just ones that could be the most feasible for somebody to utilize. So like I said, we tapped into our resources with interns, and they were able to pull the maps, the routes, and all of the aligning pantries that somebody could access. So that's kind of what you see on the screens here. It is quite small. We also are working with our marketing team to create pamphlets that we can have in the gazebos, at our pantries, at other high touch point locations for somebody to pick it up and recognize. We also did split between Fargo and Moorhead because that's something I learned, that there's two different entities that kind of combine together with our MAP bus system. Questions?
I'd also like to thank MapBus. They're putting it on their website, so there will be a list of the food pantries that coordinate with the route that they're on. So if an individual's looking for a bus route, they can also see that there are food pantries along the way that if they are in need of food assistance, they can stop at.
Mm-hmm. And then I'll also note too that it does note the location, the address, their phone number, and what the hours would be at that location to decrease the barrier of knowing if I show up to a place, are they even going to be open? It should say right on there, or if they're utilizing MapBus app or their online system or the Great Plains Food Bank website as well. So trying to include all of the information as possible to help reduce barriers and increase access.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here today. Any follow-up questions of the committee regarding this initiative?
And the document I handed out is our hunger study. So that is a kind of a broad look at what we found out. In the inside sheet is just Cass and Clay County information. We thought this would be a great way to showcase it to the city and other representatives in our community.
Yes, thank you. Other thoughts? Nicole?
No, I was just going to say, thank you for doing this. I think that cross-coordination of information is so important and so hard to get in kind of one place. And so I think this is a great result of that. Thank you.
Thank you, and I just wanted to throw a shout out to Julie in Transit for partnering in this as well.
Yes.
Really important, excited about that, so thank you, Julie.
And I'd like to also note that I think it's a good way to see collaboration of existing things that are in our network, in our communities, and to collaborate and not recreate the wheel and lose that sustainability factor that you guys are all here for. So utilizing what's already existing and making a good collaboration and a great community out of it as well. So I hope you guys love it.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Zoe, would you be so kind as to pull up
Yes, sir.
the next item? Mayor Mahoney, this is a presentation that he gave. Well, I'll get into that in just a second, but he couldn't be here today, so he asked me to pinch hit for him, and I agreed to do that. So, but there's the other topic. Food, obviously, critical to all life, as is water, absolutely necessary to sustain all life. And for a long time, you may or may not know this, Fargo's been pursuing a drought-proof water supply from the Missouri River, and it's called the Red River Valley Water Supply Project. It's essentially a pipeline to take water from the Missouri River and transfer it to Lake Ashtabula, just outside Valley City, and then using the Cheyenne River that Lake Ashtabula sits on as a natural conduit to get Missouri River water to the Red River. And more recently, and the reason for this presentation was there's been an alternative offered up called the Eastern North Dakota Alternative Water Supply. Basically the same project, but instead getting the water from the McCluskey Canal rather than directly out of the Missouri River. And makes the route a little shorter, saves a considerable amount of money, and it's an acronym. Eastern North Dakota Alternative Water Supply is NDOS. So you might hear me refer to NDOS, and that's what I'm talking about. So I asked the mayor to give this at this SRC meeting, but this is a presentation he gave to the Lake Agassiz Water Authority Board back on October 11th. And Mayor Mahoney sits as the chair of LAWA is the acronym for this, so you hear me use a lot of acronyms today. But this was given on October 11th, and this was really important because we had some federal officials in attendance with us at that special board meeting, and they included, as you can see on the screen here, North Dakota Senator John Hoeven, Commissioner Camille Tootin, who's with the Bureau of Reclamation, and then in place of the Deputy Interior Secretary Tommy Boudreau, who couldn't make it, we had Director Brett Esplin, who's the Regional Director of the Bureau's Billings Office. Just a humongous region in western North Dakota. It covers most of the 9 western states in the country and extends from the Canadian border all the way to the southern tip of Texas. So really a big region. And the mayor's presentation included these things. It provided a history on the project and demonstrated the need for the project. It included a high-level overview of the project, followed up by a financial overview of the project, and then because the project's under construction, also provided an update on construction progress. This slide may seem a little hard to read, but let's proceed from left to right. This really is a timeline, a history associated with the Red River Valley Water Supply Project. And so starting on the left, you can see it dates all the way back to 1944 with the Federal Flood Control Act. Then moving to the right in 1955, the Garrison Diversion Conservancy District was created. In 65, passage of the Federal Garrison Diversion Unit Act. Then 20 years later, passage of the Federal Garrison Diversion Unit Reformulation Act. In 2000, this was really a big date on the calendar because this is when the North Dakota Water Resources Act was passed. This is what created the federal project. Then in 2003, the North Dakota legislature followed up by creating the Lake Agassiz Water Authority, and that's the authority that represents the users of water from the project, like Fargo. And then in, 2007, that federal project, because it was a federal project, it required an environmental impact study. That study was released at that time, 2007. But then unfortunately from 2008 to 2010, that EIS had to be submitted to the Department of Interior. We were waiting for a record of decision to approve that project and couldn't get it. So then, in 2011, the decision was made to move forward with a state and local project, the same Red River Valley Water Supply Project, just without federal involvement. Then in 2020, that's when this alternate was introduced, this NDOS alternate, because again, it would get the water from the McCluskey Canal rather than directly out of the Missouri River. But because of that, the McCluskey Canal is a federal asset. That also required an environmental impact study be completed. It was completed, submitted to the Department of Interior, way over January of 2021, really a big moment for this project. We were able to secure a record of decision out of the Department of Interior. I also wanted to mention late 2020, construction of certain strategic components of this project were initiated, and I'll get into those in just a second. So this is kind of a busy slide to read, but this just shows the relationship between the various parties on the upper right, or upper left, excuse me, the Garrison Diversion Conservancy District that represents the state of North Dakota. Moving to the right, the upper right, Lake Agassiz Water Authority, representing the local users of water from the project. Then lower left, the State Water Commission and state legislature, acting through the Legislative Water Topics Overview Committee, and then lower right, the federal government. And so this is a slide that illustrates the NDOS alternative project. It's essentially a pipeline from the McCluskey Canal to the Cheyenne River just above Lake Ashtabula. This slide, interestingly, also shows an intake on the Missouri River that was part of the original federal project, and the project's been working with other potential users of that direct intake, such as the city of Washburn, to utilize that structure so that it's not a stranded asset. The total estimated costs for NDOS is $1.16 billion in today's dollars. This is a slide that we've used many times, but it shows a 2-year snapshot in time of flow on the Red River. It illustrates how vulnerable the Red River is with respect to river flows. And so it shows the year 2011 and 2012. And you can see on the left, flooding conditions in 2011. That's a case of too much flow. As a matter of fact, we hit a peak of 35,000 cubic feet per second. I'll give you the comparative in just a moment. And then in 2012, you can see just a dramatic change in flow. In the fall of 2012, too little flow. In fact, flow in the river reached about 50 cubic feet per second. So you have to compare 35,000 to 50. That's a drastic difference. And this slide shows how quickly things can change from a drought perspective. You can see on the left, mid-2022, normal to wet conditions. Then in the spring of 23, abnormally dry to moderate drought conditions. And then in the fall of 2023, just this fall, adding in some severe to extreme drought conditions. And this slide includes a quote from Daryl Richardson, who's with the North Dakota Agricultural Network, that kind of sums it all up. We live in this highly dynamic, changing climate. In 1975, the Red River in Fargo went up to the highest point it's ever gone in the summer. The next year, the Red River was dry. That's the reality of where we live. So that's why this project exists. It's important to note that there have been a lot of modeling done over the years. They've all concluded that under a 1930s type of drought, when it returns, that the project would have had to supply us with water in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Those studies have shown that the Missouri River is the only reliable source of water in the state of North Dakota. And you may already know this, but the Missouri River contains 95% of all the surface water in the state of North Dakota. That picture you can see there shows conditions in the Red River as recently as 2021. This is really important to note that the project will ultimately serve 50% of the state's population. The planning horizon for this project is 2075, which anticipates a population served with water from this project of more than 500,000. And interestingly, that population would also account for about 50% of the state's taxable sales. And because we had federal officials with us on October 11th, we wanted to point out that there are some federal benefits to NDOS as well. Currently, only 3% of the Garrison Diversion Unit facilities are being utilized. Under the NDOS alternative, the local users would pay the federal government for use of the McCluskey Canal, resulting in new revenue. Local users would also pay for a portion of the operation and maintenance of the canal, also new revenue. And then finally, the McCluskey Canal would start being used for one of its actual original intended purposes. And then in addition to that, federal funding help for this project would save the state and local water users millions of dollars, as you can see on this slide, through lower construction costs and through annual operating and maintenance costs. This was referenced earlier on the timeline slide, but NDOS was successful in getting a record of decision from the Department of Interior on their environmental impact study. And so that will allow the delivery of Missouri River water out of the McCluskey Canal to Lake Ashtabula. Lake Ashtabula happens to lie in the Hudson Bay drainage basin. That's why that was necessary. This slide shows some funding, the dollars associated with the current state biennial work plan for the project. Total construction cost of $240 million. That's subject to a 75-25 cost share, 75% being the state of North Dakota, meaning $180 million contribution, 25% from the local water users, meaning a $60 million local contribution. And so bottom line with the federal officials is we were requesting federal help with two things. The first being a reauthorization of the Dakota Water Resources Act, originally passed in 2000, and then also an increase in the MR&I ceiling for the state of North Dakota. MR&I stands for Municipal, Rural, and Industrial. Currently, there are only 11.22 million remaining in the state's MR&I program, and the eligible federal share of NDOS alone would be $454 million, so you can see why that would be necessary. This slide, a little difficult to read, but the point is the federal ask of this project in the 2023-2025 work plan, $97 million, 26-27 work plan, $140 million, 2028 to 2030 work plan, $217 million. So there's that total ask again of the federal government of $454 million. This slide shows construction progress thus far. If you look at the left part of the screen at the Missouri River intake, two separate projects, the screening and tunneling project to get out in the river, and then on land a pumping station and wet well. Both of those are complete. On the right part of the screen, the discharge outfall at the Cheyenne River, also complete. And then in the middle of the screen, a component of the pipeline that's complete at this point, which is segment 5A, and a component of the pipeline that's under construction, and that's segment 5B. And then, since picture's worth 1,000 words, the mayor also included a few slides with pictures of the construction. This is a picture of the big 72-inch pipe that's being placed. This slide shows an example of the easement corridor before and after the pipeline is put in the ground. It does result in a disruption in ag land, so it's really important that restoration be done well to put that ag land back into production. And this slide, just a couple aerial pictures on the right, that's at the Missouri River intake, and on the left, that's the Cheyenne River discharge right above Lake Ashtabula, both of which are complete. And so here's the work plan for this biennium, 23-25. As I mentioned, it includes $240 million worth of work, which includes 27 miles of pipeline that either under construction or shovel ready. It includes continued design work on another 41 miles of pipeline and design work on that orange segment of pipeline on the left. That's the 11 miles of pipeline extending to the McCluskey Canal. And so in summary, this was the ask of the federal representatives for the federal eligible share of NDOS, which is $454 million. Of that, $90 million is shovel ready, and the federal officials that were in attendance were quite impressed with that. But to accomplish that, there would need to be, again, a reauthorization of the Dakota Water Resources Act and an increase in the federal MR&I funding. And so that was the update given to the Lake Agassiz Water Authority Special Board meeting and the federal officials that we had with us on October 11th. I think it highlights the importance of water security for not just Fargo, but this project will serve central and eastern North Dakota as well. It's a multi-generational supplemental water supply for periods of drought or insufficient water. And the thing about food and water is, as we all know, you can't survive without either one of them. So both are critically important. And at this point, I was going to ask Chairman Strand or Mayor Mahoney for comments. They're not with us today, but I would be happy to take comments from anybody at the table, try and answer any questions you might have. This is a really exciting, sustainable project. When it comes to water, it's about as important a thing to all living things as there is. So open it up to questions. Quick 22 slides, but that's where we are. Wish us luck. How about that? Okay, thank you. I expected some questions that I couldn't answer, but thanks for not throwing too many of those out today. Okay, moving on to item 5 on our agenda. At our August 8th meeting, you probably recall that HDR gave us kind of a high-level introduction to sustainability planning. Part of the discussion was centered around how do we do that and where do we start? And so it was suggested that a subcommittee or a working group be formed to work with HDR on this. So not really knowing what we were doing, some internal staff gathered with Chairman Strand to discuss how to move this forward. It was suggested that ultimately the working group should consider representation from city department stakeholders, obviously, like administration, facilities, utilities, planning, streets, transit, inspections, and then Abinia expressed an interest in participating in that as well, so the Fargo Youth Commission. So Becky and I worked with HDR to put together an initial draft kickoff meeting agenda, and we met on October 5th. for that initial kickoff session, and I'll have Colin go over that in just a minute, who's joined us online. But those in attendance at that initial kickoff were Commissioner John Strand, Mayor Mahoney, Brenda Derrig, Becky Majerus, and Ben Dow, and myself. Nicole, were you there for that as well? Oh, okay. And then from HDR, it was Colin Rolfing, Josh Greenfield, and Brian King. So we started out with a smaller group, but thought moving forward we could maybe customize future meetings based on what particular topic we were going to talk about, whether that's transportation, fleet, buildings, utilities, building code, Sean, or those types of things, to just try best utilize everybody's time. And so with that introduction, Colin, can I turn it over to you to talk about that first working session, the results of that, and where we plan to kind of go from here?
Of course. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. And you can see the screen, looks like. So we have a fairly short agenda. Can cover this in about minutes and have a conversation and take questions. Just going to do a quick review of the scope of work and where this scope of work wanted to prioritize its list of deliverables. So as Bruce just mentioned, there's a lot of things we could have done: water, transit, waste, utilities, buildings, doing actual calculations versus a pathway versus funding. And so I'm just going to review what's going to be delivered in the short term, and then maybe what that could lead to as next steps. And so what we had prioritized was an action timeline, which is essentially in draft format right now for everyone to discuss, which walks you through step by step what the city should be doing to push the sustainability and resiliency efforts forward, to get the right information, to partner with the right funding sources, to do the right tasks, get the right procurement in place to ensure success in the future. And then once I review that draft, which there's an executive summary page of that timeline, the detailed tasks are going to be created for the final report, and that'll be determined based upon feedback from this group and others to figure out which items get the most detail. Most likely it's the first few steps. And then we can have a discussion about prioritization, just to ensure and build consensus around, yep, we think this is the right thing to deliver. Let's see the final report. So that's just a brief summary. Just to reiterate, and I've shown this slide a few times to this committee and usually prep meetings with this, what should the deliverables of this very initial sustainable and resiliency discovery effort be? And the two biggest things that always come to the top are list of grants and funding. Please, let us know how we can fund some of these things to get us started, and the kind of action timeline for procurement efforts needed to get started on sustainability and resiliency planning. So that's kind of what the focus is going to be. How do we fund it? What steps do we take for procurement to get this going? And where do we see the most opportunity? We spent a lot of our focus around buildings and central utilities. There's been some great work done with waste, water, transit in the past, but we felt like maybe the focus of this effort was going to be around new and existing buildings as well as the utilities that serve them. So you will see more of a focus in this draft summary plan on those two items. However, we should still consider everything to be holistic and connected. So we're not forgetting about the other items. We're just making sure that those two come to the top and come to the front. So this is an executive summary slide of where we think procurement and next steps should be for the city of Fargo to kind of focus on a sustainability, resiliency, and eventual decarbonization plan for all of these different categories. Now, it's a bit busy at the moment, but that's because it's the executive summary. I'm going to show some slides that are a little clearer that kind of hone in on the focus areas. But the intention here is to figure out for water, waste, transit, energy, utility systems, and then new and existing facilities, what we do in the near term. We've defined that as the years 2024 through 2030. what we do in the midterm, 2030 to 2040, and then what we do in the long term to get things going towards a kind of a decarbonization, sustainability, resiliency plan. Now, we looked at a lot of the existing documents that have been created by the City of Fargo. There's the Go 2030 plan. There's the SRC's white paper. And, you know, a lot of the recommendations in those documents are to do some of these things. And so I think the only issue that was had in the past was, well, okay, how do we do them and how do we fund them? So you'll see in green here, everything that's in green, we've identified and we've brought in HDR economists to meet with the City of Fargo to talk about going after grants, funding grants that can fund some of these things. So you see, for example, in the energy and existing facility category, there is an EPA CPRG planning grant that could help with the greenhouse gas emissions inventory effort, right? And then once you have that inventory with a plan to reduce, you can go after phase 2 of the CPRG EPA grant, which is a lot more money, and then allows you to implement those sustainability and decarbonization strategies. If that grant is not received, there's also opportunities, and we discussed this in our last meeting with Bruce and Becky and others, that some of this energy monitoring and benchmarking can come from Excel Energy. They have a program you can partner with to help you kind of get a sense of where your facilities are benchmarked. But you know, if you know that CPRG money is not procured, we can also use some existing funds that already exist from another grant, the EPA EECBG grant, to either do that benchmarking or go straight into other things like retrocommissioning for these facilities. And so since this is a lot, you know, we thought that each one of these tasks is going to get its own page, and those pages would be would provide details about the task, you know, resources on how to do it, a brief description, you know, where it should be within the timeline of things, to help you give you more information about, well, how do you do a GHG inventory, or what kind of retrocommissioning plan should you put in place, and how would you write a procurement document for that? So, you know, in order to then focus in and provide those details, we thought that although this long-term plan is good to see and informs what we should do first, that maybe our efforts are really only focused on, you know, this near term. Why don't we make sure that we understand how we take these first steps from 2024 to 2030? And given the fact that our prioritization for this effort was supposed to be utilities and facilities, new and existing, maybe we leave some of the water, waste, and transit funding opportunities and movement to other endeavors. We still want to know where they are, because some of these things, some of this funding can be, you can use the money to pay for all of these things, right? Especially the EPA grants. And so if we're only looking at the near-term energy and facility items, we can kind of get like a close-up shot of where we want to start this. And this is going to be part of the final deliverable and up for discussion with this group, is that each one of these things, the GHG inventory, the energy monitoring, doing an on-site energy and renewable energy study, ongoing retrocommissioning for all these facilities, new design standards for existing building retrofits as well as new construction buildings, and then finally decarbonization strategies, which is your climate action plan with cost and payback information to decarbonize the entire all the assets of Fargo, is the end goal here before the year 2030. You know, all of these things will get their own detailed description with resources and links of how to do this and maybe what funding is best to use for that effort. And so our final deliverable is going to be this executive summary plus pages for each one of these items. We're very open to changing how we look at this, maybe moving money around to fund different things, going after different grants. But this is our first pass at an actionable plan to say, you know, let's get started. You know, how can we help you guys get started? So I'm going to stop right here for a second and see if there's any comments about this approach, because our next step will be to create more detail around each one of these items. And I don't want to create too much detail until we think that this is the right thing to do, that there's some consensus among the committee about these items.
Thank you, Colin. Yeah, comments, follow-up questions for Colin based on what you've heard. We've kind of selected a direction, and we could switch directions, but as of now, this is kind of what I think the working group came up with as a plan to try to get to ultimately a sustainability plan. Funding is always the big deal. I've tried to emphasize to HDR that we've got a lot of things on shelves, a lot of places, but unfortunately we can't afford them, so that's where they stay. And so funding is always, it seems like, the showstopper. So questions of the committee for Colin? I don't think it's because we have an intolerant chair today, but there just doesn't seem to be a whole lot of questions. Zoe, you didn't get many either, so. Thanks, Colin. Have you concluded?
If there's no questions, I actually would just want to just show you guys really fast, and I'll just take a minute here to wrap up if that's okay. So these are the steps, but just so you guys know, the follow-up to this, just so you're aware, our economists have been working with the city, and Bruce has sitting at meetings to look at all of these grants. This is both EPA, IIJA, and FEMA grants. And a lot of these, if applied to appropriately, could fund a lot of those tasks. And so especially the IIJA ones, they can go towards transit or water or waste or energy, as long as they're focusing on carbon and disadvantaged communities. We can use that in a lot of ways. And so there's some follow-up that's happening here to apply for this funding. And the intention is, yes, we want to at some point apply for the larger EPA grant, which would include a kind of sustainability, resiliency, and decarbonization wedge for your assets and your facilities. This is just an example of one of those wedges. And so, I think that other things in this document are updates to code, writing new design standards for new and existing buildings. So even if this is an example of design standards, we did for City of Tempe, another client, even if we don't get one pathway going, it's still good to execute some of the tasks. New design standards would be a great idea. And so anyway, I just wanted to state that there's a lot of potential follow-up for all of those items, but it would be good to procure the funding for marketing and get the plan in place. So
thanks,
that's
Colin.
what we're working on right now.
We'll go to Nicole.
Chair, Honorable Chair, I'd like to ask a question on, with grants, maybe Colin might have a good, I'm curious if you have a good formula, if you will. I think lots of us in our offices work with federal grants on a pretty routinely basis, and I've been starting to use maybe a ratio, if you will, federal dollars per, I'll just talk on behalf of my fellow colleagues, staff load, what that takes to manage the grants and paperwork and facilitation. Julie's laughing at me. And so I know in the HUD world, working with housing and urban development, I'm still trying to figure out what that grant ratio is, but I'm guessing it's about 300,000 per staff need. And so that is my understanding of how we work in the planning office. We're not really sustaining there, but that's where I get a little anxious in terms of staff capacity when it comes to just financial capacity. I know firms like HDR and there's others help with that management, and maybe with your experience or expertise, when you write for these grants, consider that staff load and requesting that capacity management for that.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. Colin, can you pull up your presentation and go back to the grant opportunities slide that you showed If you could do that real quick, I wanted to point out the CBG grant that you referenced. We were notified that Fargo could receive a direct allocation of $174,000. And we had to submit a pre-application to lock that down, which we did. Now, and we applied for a grant, but now we've been given the option of, wouldn't have to be a grant, a lot of regulations and reporting associated with the grant, or a voucher, it's called, a reimbursable format that apparently is far less intrusive. So my next plan was, we haven't submitted the actual application yet, but I wanted to talk to Nicole and others about this voucher idea. Is that worth considering?
Probably. If you, Ben will remember, so you might remember our office was the, in fact, Go 2030 was funded through EECBG, the first go around during the Obama administration. And so I think that was a direct allocation for, I think about 250,000. But I would say between Kim Satrowski, Megan Elshag, our office, I know Ben's office, it touched many different departments, and each of us, I mean, it was still a load to carry, and not to be defensive about it, but I think just being mindful of, because also what happens is, like our past EPA grants, you know, it's 5 years, and so your staff turnover or your again, paperwork, understanding where that project management is just having that incorporated into the daily operations. I think one of the things from a management perspective is sometimes that soft cost doesn't get attributed into the cost of the project. And so one of the things that I know our HUD advisors from the HUD office, from the Denver office, always suggest is make sure to write that into the grant so that you're covering those costs. It's easy to, sometimes it's easy as a manager, I know I've been guilty of this, is to just, oh yeah, we could do that, and then not adding that into the cost. So I just, I know it's been helpful to have consultants help us with that, and they write that self stuff in, just being mindful of that. But voucher might be the way. I don't know if that was an option for us way back when.
Well, we were up against the clock when I got brought into this, and knowing we've always dealt with grants and there's a little bit of voucher research I didn't have time to do, submitted the pre-application for a grant, but now been notified, hey, it's not too late if you'd like to switch that to the voucher program. And so that's where we are right now. So, no, I appreciate those comments, Nicole. I mean, hey, it's great, grants are great, but once you commit to them, you've got to stay in compliance. The last thing you want to do is fall out of compliance.
Well, and all these federal offices have, I know we all work with them, have leadership that has some mandates. I don't know, Colin, if you had a go-to formula or anything that you work with. I guess that was kind of the heart of my question.
Yeah, Nicole, I'm going to have to pass that to our economists. I think Bruce is going to set up a meeting with them to walk through each one of these and figure out what the capacity is for you guys to go after them. I'd be very curious to know, you said $300,000, you know, it takes, what does that number mean? It means over the life cycle of a grant, it's going to cost you guys $300,000 to manage it?
No, for every $300,000 we get allocated for federal money. So HUD gives us 1.9 million a year, about, or 1.8 a year. And then each of that 1.8 million gets allocated to projects in our community or inside city government. So the act of spending money, so you're project managing $1.8 million worth of projects, and then that equals a staff load. And so that staff load equals $300,000 about.
Yep.
Okay. Understood. Yeah, they'll need to know that to help you guys determine which one of these are worth it then.
Thank you, Nicole. Colin, other questions for Colin on what you've heard or seen? If not, thanks for joining us, Colin. I don't know if I introduced coworker Brian King in the audience. Thanks, Brian, for being here today, also helping with this. So more to come on this. This will be a reoccurring update on progress. We've made on this study each time we meet. So thank you. Item number 6 on the agenda, SRC bus wrap update. And I show youth initiative here. I probably wasn't all that correct, but Abinia, can I give a short intro to this? And if I mess it up, you can save me. During the first week of September, I think it was, right around the beginning of school, a flyer was sent to most, if not all, of the art teachers in the Fargo Public School District. And it was calling for student artists for artwork design for a bus wrap. And we had placed a submittal deadline for the artwork of October 6th, 2023. Unfortunately, due to whatever reason, we didn't get any submittals. And so we would like to try that again, but this time asking for the help from the planning department, who's agreed to help us carry the water on this, thank goodness, very important. And Abinia, my understanding is you've been working with Catlin and Megan here, so that's really important. But the other thing we decided to do was to add some prize money, kind of an incentive. And so the idea we came up with was 3 $250 prizes for the 3 artwork winners. And we were fortunate that our comms department was able to, through their marketing budget, be able to help us with that. And so a big thanks to Catlin, Megan in planning, Nicole, you as well, and Greg from comms, Abinia from the Youth Commission helping out. But did I steal all of your thunder? Did I leave anything? I know you've been meeting, and maybe you could update the group on things you've been doing.
Yeah, I just want to update, looking at the timeline. So we were thinking summer into fall, and now it'll be more of a winter into spring kind of timeline. So we want to I'm working with comms and planning on getting a press release out there in December. We're looking at early to mid-December. And then we'll close off the submittal deadline again, January, mid-January. Just hoping that more people get to know about the project, more people are submitting. And then, yeah, just looking into the spring for actually getting it onto the bus and things like that is, yeah.
And then as I was putting the agenda together for today, the first SRC meeting in 2024, I think makes sense to occur in February, which would line up well with the timeline you just talked about, so that maybe we would have something we could act on in February, whatever that date is.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you. Nicole, did I steal all your thunder?
No, we're just delighted to be working with Abinia. I know Catlin and Megan, and so no, we're just here to support the project.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee members on that initiative, that effort?
I have a question. Will it be shared on Facebook? I know a few nonprofits that work with kids that it would be great to get it on their Facebooks.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about working with communications. We'll have a whole outreach method, so you'll definitely see it by social media, hopefully, and ask for everybody's help to advocate and push that forward, and the school district, et cetera.
And I spoke, this is probably not that important to this committee, but we were talking about some sort of RFP type, some version of soliciting.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we mean by the press release is soliciting artists and student artists, right? And getting them to, enticing them to submit their artwork that could be wrapped around a bus.
Great. Other thoughts or comments? If not, we're to number 7. This is the public comment period. We've got 2 members here, so the mic is yours if you'd like to. Do we have any members of the public that would like to comment today? We do not. So the next meeting, tentatively, I show as February 13th, 2024. I think we'll let that float a little bit. Maybe it could be later in February, depending on how our pursuit of artwork selection goes. And but it would be in February of next year, which I think will line up well. So With that, I'm going to make my 2:00 meeting after chairing this SRC meeting. That's great. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.